When you're standing in front of a rack mount NAS or a tiny industrial mini PC and trying to decide whether to splurge on a massive memory upgrade, the anxiety is real. You've probably already looked at a few specs sheets, seen the 96GB headline, and thought, that sounds like overkill for what I do. I've been there, and I spent the last week swapping modules, reading the fine print on compatibility lists, and talking to a few sysadmins who actually run 48GB SODIMMs in production. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about why a 248GB DDR5 kit even exists for a SODIMM form factor. The main market for these modules is small footprint workstations, microservers, and edge devices that need the reliability of ECC memory without the bulk of a full-size DIMM. If your workload involves running multiple virtual machines, a small SQL instance, or a containerized data pipeline on a chassis that's barely the size of a shoebox, those extra gigabytes can prevent swapping and keep latency low. The ECC part is what makes this kit more than just a lot of RAM. It constantly checks each data word for single-bit errors and corrects them on the fly, which is a lifesaver for applications where data integrity can't be compromised. Now, before you click Add to Cart, there are a couple of practical hurdles you need to clear. First, not every laptop-sized board will even recognize a 48GB module. The spec sheet mentions a 262-pin ECC SODIMM, and you have to verify that your motherboard's BIOS actually supports both the capacity and the ECC feature. In my research, a handful of Intel NU-type boards and some Supermicro mini ITX systems list up to 64GB per slot as a maximum, meaning a 48GB stick will work, but a 96GB total might push the memory controller to its limit. The second snag is voltage. These run at 1.1V, which is lower than many older DDR4 SODIMMs, but you still need a power delivery system that can handle the extra load when both sticks are fully populated. In practice, I didn't see any throttling on a test rig that used a 65W power brick, but that's because the kit is designed for low-power platforms. If you're the type of user who runs a single desktop OS for web browsing and office work, you'll probably never notice the difference between 32GB and 96GB in a small form factor. In fact, you might end up paying a premium for capacity you'll never use, and you could even run into compatibility headaches if your system only supports non-ECC modules. For those folks, a more modest 16GB or 32GB DDR5 SODIMM would be a smarter spend. The sweet spot for the NEMIX 96GB kit is clearly the professional or hobbyist who needs to run heavy workloads on a compact chassis. Think a home lab with several VMs, a small-scale AI inference node, or a remote monitoring server that can't afford data corruption. On the strength side, the most tangible benefit I saw was stability under sustained load. I built a test environment with a mini PC running Ubuntu server, 2 VMs, and a PostgreSQL database that was constantly hammering the storage subsystem. With the 96GB kit in place, the system never hit swap, and the ECC logs in the kernel showed a handful of corrected single-bit errors, which is exactly what you want to see, the memory catching problems before they cause crashes. The lifetime replacement warranty also adds peace of mind. If a module ever fails, you won't be stuck hunting for a rare part. That kind of support is rare in the consumer market and makes the purchase feel less risky for businesses. The downsides are more about the environment than the memory itself. Because these are unbuffered ECC modules, they're not a drop-in replacement for registered DIMM memory you might find in larger servers. If you ever plan to move this kit into a rack mount server that expects DIMMs, you'll be out of luck. Also, the heat output is modest but not negligible. On a cramped mini PC with poor airflow, the two sticks can push the ambient temperature a few degrees higher. I noticed the system fan had to spin up a bit more often during stress tests, which translated into a slightly louder operation. If silence is a top priority, you may need to add a small heatsink or improve case ventilation. Another practical point is the cost per gigabyte. DDR5 SODIMMs are still premium items, and the 96GB kit sits at a price point that many hobbyists balk at. However, when you break it down, you're essentially paying for the ECC feature and the high capacity in a tiny form factor, not just raw speed. The 4800 MHz frequency and CL40 latency are perfectly adequate for most server-type workloads, but they won't give you a noticeable edge in gaming or graphic design, where the bottleneck is usually the GPU. So if you're looking for a performance boost in those areas, this isn't the right product. One more thing I learned from digging through user forums is that the check your config warning isn't just legal jargon. A few owners reported that their